Um, awesome. Well, let's talk about the story of dance-mat.js. Just a little bit of a heads up. I am going to be playing a little bit of music during this. And because we don't have HDMI audio, I'm going to just be holding my microphone up to the laptop. So I figured I'd give you all the best experience of it. But yeah, I had a lovely introduction from Joanna. My name is Ramón, pronounce he, him. I'm originally from Chile, living in Austria. I've lived there for a very long time, and I'm just a big fan of like the community vibe and how we come together through learning mutually. And I do a lot of like learning initiatives like the Bad Website Club, which my friend Jessica and I started to be able to sort of help peel away a little bit of that sense of like over-stressing perfection that I'm sure a lot of us feel when we're trying out new things. And in the spirit of talking about trying out new things, I just want to get a feel for the room. I love music video games, and I want to check, does anybody know or play any music video games? Sweet, okay. Now this is going to be the part where Ramón makes himself feel really old. How many of y'all know Just Dance? How many of y'all play Just Dance? Okay, cool, great, great, great. Does any of you know or play Beat Saber? Yeah, cool. I got my first ever VR thingy a few months ago, and y'all, this game is fun. But I'm actually going to talk about a video game today that's perhaps a little bit older, and I also want to check if any of y'all know it. Dance Dance Revolution, or DDR? Do we got any fans? Yes, okay, wonderful. And this GIF illustrates it really well. DDR is a game where you're pressing buttons on a mat to the rhythm of the music. And this is usually illustrated. This is a, this is a screenshot from DDR on PS1, on the original PlayStation. And as you can see, the arrows are moving up, and you're supposed to press them to the rhythm, so it kind of looks like you're dancing. And what kind of music? Well, the music of this game, the music of this game, it's very iconic of that late 90s Eurobeat stuff going on. I actually have a sample here that I'd love to illustrate to all of you, just to give you an idea of like the kind of, I think the cool kids once said bangers that we used to dance to. And here we go. I have no idea if this is gonna work. Let's find out. All right, that's enough, that's enough. It's a lot of fun, and so like a few years ago, my spouse and I wanted to like try playing it again. They'd never played it before, and of course we didn't have access to a PlayStation or any of that. So it turns out, in case any of y'all are curious, there is an open source version of DDR called Stepmania. Do any of y'all know it? Okay, I'm quickly finding a fellow fan here. We need to talk later. Yes. It gives you the ability to not only like program your own DDR songs, but also like play all of them in lots of mods and varieties of ways of playing. And so when we wanted to start playing DDR, or Stepmania, I'm gonna call it DDR for moving forward, we needed a controller. And a lot of the time, these controllers, especially when making them more accessible for the general public, come in these foam mats. And any of y'all that had these foam mats, you know that after a few weeks or months of playing very much every day, you know, these were foam and they had like little contacts on them. And the problem with them is that these contacts would like fade over time. So a lot of the time after using one of these, you're gonna find yourself with this screen a lot of the time. Game over screen. So it turns out that people do sell like arcade quality dance mats that are made of like metal, and they have like real buttons, and like you push them with all your feet. And the thing about them is that you can buy them, but they cost a lot. I don't know if you can see in the screenshot, but actually that's $339 discounted from $900. That's a lot of money for, you know, this kind of a hobby. So we just stuck with our phone mats, and it was all good fun and all that. But then we went, and I love that we're in this venue for this. Then I went to Maker Faire Vienna. Do y'all know Maker Faire? Ooh, okay, so this is an event where folks get together, and like, as the vibe in this venue kind of gives that too, is to celebrate that joy and curiosity of hacking on things. And you get to learn new skills if you want like woodworking or like CNC stuff. And I went up and I found a booth from a company called Bear Conductive. And what they had was this, conductive paint. Have you all ever heard of conductive paint? Oh my goodness, I get to introduce so many to you to it. And what it is essentially, it is paint that you can use to conduct electricity. So like a demo they had is that you could like have a battery and have a little paint line go over to a light bulb, and then that light bulb goes back to the battery. And once it dried, you essentially had a circuit. And it worked. But as you can see in this demo, it's not just conductive, it's also capacitative, which means that it responds to the electricity in your body to carry a charge. So what you see here is an actual working piano where that was painted by a human being. And so when I saw that, I was like, huh, that's cool. I bought myself one of those. They're called caps. We'll get into that in a minute. And I took a look at their instructions for programming one, and this is JavaScript. And I was looking at this, and I was thinking, like, hey, this is not too far removed from my expertise. Like, my daily work involves more web development, but this doesn't look too far removed from what I could do with JavaScript. So I was like, what could I do with this? I love this GIF. I'm just going to let it run. So then I went into Stepmania, right? And it turns out that being an open source game and having all of these options, well, you could just set up a controller to play however you like. So after, like, I'm going to stop teasing. So essentially what we did was we took some Node.js, a bucket of the paint, a Raspberry Pi, one of the caps for responding to the paint itself, and yes, a yoga mat. And we thought, let's make something from this. In case you're not familiar with it, by the way, the Raspberry Pi that I have here today, this is the Raspberry Pi Zero, which is a tiny computer. It's like, you can come look at it later if you like. It's like this big. It's like the size of, it's like a credit card cut in half. Like, it's pretty small, and it essentially runs Linux. It's a full-fledged computer, and I think I paid like 10 euros for it. So after some work, and what I'm going to showcase to you today is dance-mat.js. Hey, thank you. OK, thank you. You're all too kind. So the thing you all have to know about this is, like I said, I'm a web developer by trade, and quite frankly, when it comes to hardware, I'm pretty new to this. But here's the plan we had, right? We're going to take the dance mat, we're going to plug it into a computer, we're going to connect it to a computer in some way, and the computer's going to go, oh yeah, cool, this is a keyboard. I know what to do with it. Which is, if you're familiar with this sort of thing, an ambitious thing. But take a look at the code, right? What we have here is a code for setting up the Pi cap, which is that piece of hardware that connects, or the cap that sits on the Raspberry Pi and communicates with the conductive paint. And what it's doing as soon as we touch it, as soon as it gets a charge, we can just do stuff with it. I left myself a very helpful comment here that says, send data to PC, which makes it sound simple, but it turns out in hindsight that it was quite a bit of work. So the first idea was, well, I'm a hardware hacker now, I guess. Why not make it super straightforward and connect it via Bluetooth? Have any of y'all tried programming Bluetooth before? OK, y'all know where I'm going with this, right? Yeah, it's not easy, it turns out, especially if you want to do something like playing stuff to the rhythm over a wireless connection. Like, come on, we've all used headphones and stuff over Bluetooth. You're not exactly there for playing music video games with Bluetooth. So no, plan B was to use USB. And this turns out to be still relatively straightforward compared to Bluetooth, but also quite a bit of work. Because the thing about a Raspberry Pi, right, is you see it's got two USB ports on it. The first one is to give it power, but the second one is to give it power and communicate with a host or a computer. And hey, one thing I learned is that you can't just plug a Raspberry Pi into a computer and be like, hey, I'm a keyboard, I guess. And the computer's going to be like, okie dokie, I guess you're a keyboard. And you might be thinking, if you have some experience with this sort of thing, you might be thinking, but Ramón, why did you think you could just plug a Raspberry Pi into a computer and make it think that it's a keyboard? And I would just like to remind you folks who are thinking that right now, that this is my first time doing this kind of project. So yes, it required a little bit of, and a lot of bit of Googling, a lot of bit of like taking a step back from what I know and just being like, well, there are things that I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know, and not knowing is part of learning. So it turns out that it is actually possible to configure a Raspberry Pi to communicate with a computer as if it were a USB gadget. And this is called a USB gadget mode. And in fact, this link that I've left here will actually walk you through, mostly through copy-pasty things, that turn your Raspberry Pi into a USB gadget. This article in particular really helped me set up this Raspberry Pi in order, as I said, in order to do that. And there are 2 steps to it. The first is to enable, remember this is Linux we're talking about, telling the Linux that is on board my Raspberry Pi to turn on OTG or on-the-go mode. This way, I can boot it up via the data channel and have it communicate with my computer. Then, and that number 2 sounds pretty straightforward, but y'all are going to see that it's a lot, adding a script via kernel extension that allows me to tell the Raspberry Pi, hey, when you plug me into a computer, please tell it I'm a keyboard. So, cool. Take my Raspberry Pi, plug it into the USB port, run some commands, which are not in my slides right now, and I'm so sorry, I don't know where they went. But there are like 3 commands in there that, that turn on this OTG mode. And don't worry, like you can find them in this link here. But it's essentially 3 commands that you turn on that, amongst other things, configure this at something called config.fs, which is a virtual file system dedicated to Linux configurations. And if you're seeing my face, yeah, I don't know a lot about Linux, it turns out. But I'm learning, and that's the part that matters. So yes, it is crossed out, but like there were some commands there that I changed my slides, and I think I misplaced it. I'm sorry. But then I want to show you this boot script, because like, y'all, look at the size of this. So I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea what half of this does. But that's fine. Like, I was confused, and I was talking to some friends, and they were telling me, like, essentially what's going on here is you're setting up config.fs to tell the computer, hey, I'm a device. And if you look at these lines that I've highlighted here, you know how when you like plug in a device to a computer and it's like setting up device XYZ? That's what I'm setting up here. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm plugging in the DDR mat from Ramón Huidobro, because I was like, yeah, this is a device made by me. Thank you very much. And essentially what I said, like what I'm doing here with config.fs is setting it up in order to be a keyboard. And then when I tried it out, oh, can I show you all the sound that it made on my computer when I plugged it in? And let me tell you, this is the most incredible sound that you'll ever hear when you're messing around with hardware, and it works. Come with me on a journey. Wait, I don't know y'all heard it. Let me try again. No, you can't hear it, can you? Let me try one more time. I'm sorry, folks. Yo, this microphone's really good at not picking up. I was trying to do like the Windows USB plug-in, the toot-toot-toot. It was just more fun if my computer had done it. Sorry about that. Anyway, it was so invigorating to get it already to plug in and tell me what kind of device it was. But then I needed to communicate with it. So I went to the USB HID, or Human Interface Device, documentation, which was like a 40 megabyte, 300-page PDF. And I started reading through all of this documentation, and I made this sound. I remember I looked at it, and I made this sound like, do y'all know basset hounds? You know, the dogs, the ones with the big droopy ears? Like, have you ever heard one of them bark? I think that's kind of like the sound I made. I went like, woo. It was a lot to read. But you know what? I went to my local hackerspace, and I talked to some friends, and I was like, y'all, I'm trying to like communicate, and I want to know how to be able to send this data over to my PC. And they found me a really cool resource for doing so that I'm going to show you for. And like, do you know, like, I don't know about y'all, but I struggle with asking for help. I sometimes feel like, you know, when is too early? When is too late? Like, how do I not ask my question in a way that's helpful to the person helping me? But also like, I don't know, maybe I get a little bit of imposter syndrome, especially when I'm like, I don't know what I don't know. But I feel like, especially doing so in a constructive and helpful way, I am a big fan of asking for help. Because I find this like invigorating and like empowering, especially like, come on, y'all have asked somebody something that they're really nerdy about, and you see like, like my friends and I call it like they become an unskippable cutscene, because like they're just like, okay, sit down, I'm going to tell you all of the lore of Kirby right now, and that sort of thing, right? Anyway, so the way that I'm going to communicate with via Raspberry Pi to my computer as a keyboard through the USB HID is that. And listen to this. Each keystroke is a byte array of 8 hexadecimal keys. And when I first read this, I'm like, sure, I know some of these words. But hey, I'm experimenting, I'm learning, and like, I found a really handy guide on GitHub to help me define which hexadecimal keys correspond to which keyboard key. So you can see, like, for example, A corresponds to 4 hexadecimal, B corresponds to 5, and so on and so forth. So like, I jump into my JavaScript and I was like, I'm a hardware hacker now. P1 left, well, we'll talk about P1 in a second. P1 left is A, P1 right is B, up is C, and so on and so forth. And y'all, I cannot tell you how exciting it was to be able to do this and be like, I'm making progress. It was fantastic. So, okay, cool. So now I have the definitions for being able to match a keyboard hexadecimal key code to the letter itself that I want to type in my keyboard. So when processing data, I first want to take a look at each of the receptors, and I'm going to show you a picture of the PiCap in just a second, and process which ones are being touched right now. So yes, I've defined a function here called parse pressed keys, and that function looks like this. Let's first take a look at the PiCap itself. You see that it's got like 12 circles on top? Those are called electrodes, right? So each of those is going to correspond to a key press, right? So depending on which one is being pressed, we have an array of like 0 to 11 for the 12 electrodes. Depending on which one is being pressed, I will push to my array of keys being pressed right now. Think of it like a piano chord, like these ones are being pressed right now, and I push them into an array, and then I return that array. Then I want to take that key press array and turn it into a cleaned up set of, remember, it's 8-byte arrays, an array of 8 bytes. So the first two bytes in this byte array correspond to modifier keys, right? This is going to be like Control, Shift, and all that good stuff. The second one is reserved for something else, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it is, but it doesn't matter, because the rest of the 6 are dedicated to my keys. So in a very Ramón lazy way, I just like push in all of the rest of the keys that have been pressed so far, and I just make dang sure that there are 8 at the end. So I'm just like, yep, give me 8, and I'm good. So now I've got my array of 8 bytes. And I can actually try it already. So I plug in my Raspberry Pi and I start touching the electrodes, and it's working. Which is all well and good, and I can, if I'm like plugged in, if I got my Raspberry Pi plugged into a TV, then I can see the console log showing, which is super exciting. But then comes the byte array. And y'all, I need to thank so much to the dedicated work that goes on from people much smarter than I am that went ahead and defined on the JavaScript spec a method so that you can turn an array of bytes and turn it into a dedicated byte array. So cool, initialize a byte array, pass in my array of bytes, now I have a byte array. That sounded weird out of my mouth, but y'all know what I mean. So just take my buffer, turn that into a 8-bit array of bytes. And now we need to send the keystroke via USB over to my computer. And it's not something that you can just type in buffer.send or something like this. I'm like, wait, how do I do this again? And then I remembered, hold on a minute, I'm in Linux. It's probably a file descriptor. Do y'all know file descriptors? In essence, what they are is a way for Linux, they say in Linux everything is a file, and this corresponds to a lot of things that we do in Unix as well. And so what it turns out is going on here is that any kind of I/O we want to do on a computer, especially on Linux, be it writing a document, or communicating with another device on your network, or communicating with a USB device, these are all files that you read and write to. So it turns out by pure magic that I could have read if I'd understood that boot script that I wrote, that config.fs initialized and set up a file descriptor for my USB communication between my Raspberry Pi and my computer. So by taking this file and just writing to it from the command line, just being like, as you can see here, it's not really a keystroke, but it just says, like, essentially what I'm doing is using the command echo to pipe into writing to this file. And yes, the keystroke is called blah, 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 I am a keystroke. Look, we're experimenting here. We're not like precise scientists. Anyway, I did all that and it worked. And I was getting garbage to show up on my computer, which was so exciting. And then I thought, like, you know, this is JavaScript. Is there? No, there can't be. Oh my God, there is an NPM package for communicating with file descriptors. So this incredible package called Linux device lets me essentially open up a communications channel with my file descriptor, send data to it, i.e. my byte array, and then I don't need to worry about like any kind of encoding or any of that. All I need to do is worry about like, hey, when my script starts up, set it up so that I can communicate with this file descriptor. And I think it's 16 bits. I could be wrong. Doesn't matter. And once it's open, once the script starts up, then I can take that buffer, that 8-bit array, and just write to that file. And of course, we are good citizens after all. We clean up after ourselves. When the script closes, we close the access to the device. Otherwise, things go a little bit wonky. So we've done all that. And you know what? It's time to run it. So I go on my Raspberry Pi and I start up Node dance-mat.js. And then I opened up sorry, the word escapes me, a text editor on my computer. And I start touching the electrodes. Y'all, this is the most exciting gibberish I've ever written in my life. I'm typing from a Raspberry Pi. So then came the fun part. Like, we started painting, we took the yoga mat, we started like drawing arrows with the paint. We thought like, and you saw, I was preluding this with the P2 thing, with the P1 thing, like we made it 2-player capable, then we cut it in half because it turns out that having 2 people dancing this close next to each other is gonna be, I see the nods of acknowledgement, like it's gonna be a little bit dangerous, so like we split it in 2. You can see like, we've got like specially designed like paint cables going from the buttons over to the Raspberry Pi, and then we set up and didn't work? Yes. Were we good? Kinda. I was getting D grades, but like, whatever, it was working. It was amazing, we could play. So you might be wondering, okay, cool, like you've done all this, are you set for life now? And I mean, that kind of depends on how you look at it. I started writing a little list of stuff of like, I call it the if we could do it all over again list. Now, some of y'all that might be experienced in hardware stuff, and definitely a question that was asked of me was, Ramón, you made this so complicated with all this like Linux and Raspberry Pi stuff. Why didn't you use an Arduino to do this? To which I replied, hey, that's a great question. I have a question too. What's an Arduino? Turns out it's a microcontroller that makes all of this extremely straightforward to do. But hey, lesson learned. The other thing is, turns out a yoga mat, great material for like rolling it up and putting away, but if you put paint on a yoga mat and then you roll up that yoga mat, the paint's gonna crack. So it got a little bit crinkly and like difficult to work with. And we need to talk about the paint cabling, because it turns out that in the end, what really was much more important to do was to use cables in order to do it and like solder them to the Pi cap, because then you don't worry about like, cables paint cables overlapping and all of that stuff. But it doesn't matter. Look, like there's a lot that we could have done better, but the important thing is that we learned a lot, we had a lot of fun, and I have picture proof. We're really happy in this photo here. So now you're probably wondering, okay, you've been going on about this for ages. Are you going to dance for the nice people? And like, as they say in German, jein, like yes and no. I actually want to tell you a little story of the first time I gave this talk at Half Stack Vienna. I brought a prototype. It looked like this. It's got the arrows, it's got the paint cables, it's got a Raspberry Pi very optimistically tied down with washi tape. Guess what happened? It came off. And then I thought, hey, I'll fix it with some more paint. I've got paint with me. And then two of the paint cables started overlapping. And then I tried to fix it with some water, and then it started overlapping even more. There's a German term that I really like called verschlimmbessern, which essentially means making something worse by trying to make it better. And that's exactly what happened here. But that's okay, because today I have the second version. I discovered crocodile clips. Look at them, they're so cute. I really like them. And that's what I have for you today. Now, I don't know how I'm doing with time. I've been having too much fun, but I think I have maybe a couple moments to show you how it is in action. And because, well, yeah, I've got Stepmania running on my computer as we speak. Let's get started. Let's hit start. Let me see if this is gonna work. It doesn't come through the microphone, right? You can hear it? Oh. Okay, cool. I'm gonna do this one-handed. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm really terrible at this. Here we go. Okay, yeah, I told you I'm really, you know, y'all are too kind, and I forgot to mention, I forgot to think of the fact that it's not that easy to do it with one hand while looking backwards. So we're learning a lot today. Let me just head over to my slides and let y'all go get some lunch. So, by the way, something super fun about this demo unit that I have here is that you might think wow, Ramón got some dedicated cardboard and made it look really nice. Computer, could you please flip that for me? Nah, it's a pizza box. It just speaks to the resourcefulness of what we can have with the materials at home. And so you're probably sitting here thinking okay, but I don't play DDR and I don't really care about this game or whatever. Why are you telling me about this? And so what I'm hoping to do is just tell you a little bit about my experience and what I learned and how I felt so much more comfortable and capable when I let myself not know things, learn from people, ask for help, and hardware can seem really scary, because if you fail a demo, say at a conference, and I don't know, you've got a backup video, that's cool, but I don't know about the rest of y'all, but if I'm traveling with 6 Raspberry Pis, the airport security is not going to be happy about that. And there's always a chance of another failure. So it's a little riskier, but just like software, you debug it. You have some fun. This unit has been going on steady for 5 years, which is amazing. And I just want to encourage y'all to play around, use your existing knowledge, and have it transferred to other places. There's so much support and packaging out there that can do this, most importantly. So yeah, I just want to encourage y'all to just go for it. Have fun. Here's some slides if you want to download them. I'll post them on social media.